Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm GM Mayhem. Today I am with GM. You can also find him on Twitter under Iconic Productions. So JM, tell me, most generic question ever.
Yeah.
How did you first get into the tabletop RPGs?
Oh man, this is a great question. I when I bring people on, I always ask them the same thing because I always want to know, right? Like it's
Yeah.
always the most interesting to me. So I was in fifth grade. I was the last, or sixth grade. It was the last class in Chicago that was like sixth grade was still grade school, and then seventh grade became was junior high, and then they switched it towards like 6 to 8 or whatever. And a buddy of mine traded me this Heroes Unlimited from Palladium book. Um, Gave it to me and said, "Hey, you're into superheroes. I think you'd like this." And I was like, "Cool." So I looked at it all summer, and I'll be honest, I made probably 100 characters, and I had no clue that it was a game. I just thought it was a way of like statting up superheroes for like writing a story or something like that. And went to went to middle school, and like the second week somebody was like, "Hey, um, we should play GURPS." I'm like, "I don't know what GURPS is." "Sure, I'm down." And we played for a week, and like seeing how a role-playing game worked made it all click for me. And that Friday I went home and was like, I knew three things. I loved the idea of role-playing games. I owned a role-playing game, and I could do better than my buddy in telling a story. And I have been the forever GM since. So I went, Heroes Unlimited and GURPS got me into Rifts, and that was basically what I ran for about a decade and a half. And then I branched out into games like Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun and a I mean, you can see Savage Worlds, Glorantha, uh, Torg. Just if I could get my hands on it, I'd run it.
So what's your favorite system to run?
Oh man, right now, so second edition D&D has a major place in my heart. I just 2e D&D is sort of for me the height of Dungeons and Dragons, right? That's the game I always go back to. I love the settings, I love the weirdness, I love all of the different ways things kind of cludgily fit together. I still think that 1e and 2e had some brilliant game design that sometimes gets overshadowed because it's old.
Yep.
Right now, Savage Worlds is probably my go-to system. I also work for Pinnacle, so that's sort of there's a reason why I think I lean towards Savage Worlds right now. But for me, I think the number one game, and this is shameless self-promotion, is I wrote a little Bronze Age uh, RPG called Jackals, and the clash system is it's a D100 based off of Open Quest, and it just does everything I want. I mean, that's when we as GMs write our own games, we do that so that it does everything we wish all these other games would do. And so every time I go back to Jackals, I'm like, hey, it's almost as if someone made this game. Oh wait, no, they did make this game for me because I'm the one who wrote it.
I'm working on my own system as well. It's also D100 base, but it's a skill based instead of class based.
Yeah, I mean that's I think what D100 excels at, right? The
Yeah.
fact that it's skill focused as opposed to archetype or class focused.
So you wrote Jackals. You got anything else you put out?
Right here, Urban Decay is the latest game from also I wrote several books for Osprey Games. Jackals has 3 books. It's the core book, a campaign called Fall of the Children of Bronze, and then sort of like the cultural overview book called Travels on the War Road. Urban Decay just released. It uses the same system, but it is based off Streets of Rage, the video game, and The Warriors, the old
Well,
Warriors movie from the '80s, Big Trouble
yeah.
in Little China. It's basically Osprey calls it the beat 'em up role playing game, and the idea is you are a gang in the streets of a city, and kind of leaning back into those classic 80s routes, some corporation has come into your neighborhood and is planning to demolish it or exploit it or dig for gold on it, whatever, evil corporations in the 80s were always after neighborhoods. And so you might be a group of thieves or a bunch of private investigators. You're like we call them a gang, but you're the group of heroes, and you've decided this far and no farther, and so you take to the streets to kind of fight Omnicorp's interests on your in your neighborhood. So I've written for some adventures for Savage Worlds. If you Necessary Evils 3 is coming out, and I wrote the adventure that goes in the GM screen there called The Return of Dr. Destruction. And I've written a couple of smaller adventures for them. I do line editing and developmental work for 13th Age by Pelgrane Press. So I've done a couple of small adventures and larger pieces for Torg Eternity. So I got a lot of plates spinning, but those are kind of the main things I've worked on.
Oh, cool. So anything that won't violate an NDA that you're working on?
So I own a small little gaming company with myself, my wife, and our business partner and good friend, Timothy Brown, who is the guy who did Dark Sun back in the day at
Okay.
TSR. We just were in the process of getting drive through to send out all the print on demand for Space 1889. We did the new version of Space 1889. We've got a little RPG called the Amboria World Under Starlight that's coming out hopefully later this year in PDF. We got a couple of cool new projects coming down the line. Things that won't violate NDA. I'm working on playtesting a new adventure for 13th Age Second Edition, which Pelgrane has announced, and the playtest is open, but the adventure is really cool. It's another twist on kind of the classic fantasy tropes that 13th Age has done. So they did like Eyes of the Stone Thief, but Gar wrote this adventure where the dungeon is actually like Moby Dick and is hunting the PCs, like chasing them through the world. And so instead of you going into the dungeon keeps swallowing you and you have to find your way out. And so this new adventure that he's doing kind of inverts some of those ideas as well. I've got another Jackals book that I'm working on that I'll probably privately kickstart later this year, early next year. My inspiration for that is so if Jackals is inspired by the Epic of Gilgamesh or like the Book of Judges, the Greek myths, the new project I want to do is inspired by the end of the Aeneid, the idea that Troy has fallen, you and your families escaped on ships and you've landed in this new part of the world. And the gods say that if you survive, that something great could be built. And so the idea is kind of a hexploration of this new area where maybe you found Rome or the Jackal's equivalent of Rome. But I've got some interesting ideas that I'm working through on that.
Now, when you put up new books, do you do everything yourself as far as artwork and layout, or do you contract that out?
So it's interesting. I mean, it depends on who I'm working for. If I'm doing something for Pelgrane, we've kind of created a stable of artists for 13th Age that we go to. They're like our first people that we go to. Osprey, I pitched the Jackals game, and when they picked it up, they handled the art for that. But for most of like the personal projects that I'm working on, I'm looking for new artists. My wife does layout and editing, so I lucked out that two of the four big things. You have layout, writing, art, layout, and editing. Two of the four, I'm married to the person who does that for us. So that's it's dirty pool. It's cheating. I'll admit it, but
Well, you're just
yeah,
saving on labor cost.
that's right. That's right. So I'll do the writing, she'll do the layout and editing, and that frees up most of our budget to go to art.
Now, when you're running a game, do you use props or handouts or anything like that?
Oh man. Yes. I so the other thing, so I'm sitting in, we've converted my garage into kind of the gaming studio at our house. So like I've got a big table, we can play like war games or role-playing games on. And off to the left here is my wife's crafting area. And my wife's really big into what's called paper crafts, so like making cards, you
Hmm.
know. So she's got all of this cool stuff that I just sort of co-opt for for gaming. Like if I need a fancy invitation to, you know, a party, I can make something like that up. And actually sent them out to players. We've got the, you know, the TV set up so I can put maps up or actually have NPCs call in. Like if I'm running Shadowrun, I can have my a buddy call in as, you know, Mr. Johnson and give them the mission. And then, you know, I've been playing in this hobby since the late 80s. So I've collected quite you know, uh, the collection of minis and, you know, dwarven forge tiles and, you know, all sorts of different things. So I try to make it at the table as immersive as I can. But I've recently there's a YouTube channel called oh, it's Professor Dungeon Master's channel, and I forget the
Yeah.
actual name. Yeah, Professor Dungeon Master, and I was talking about like the minimalist approach to setting up terrain, and I've been toying with that a little bit. When I run online, if I'm using a virtual tabletop, I'll try and lean into that. But online, I tend to do a lot of theater of the mind because it's just easier. You know, I'm getting to play with people that I don't see very often, so I'm much more interested in the story that we're telling and the game that's going on as opposed to, you know, does this map have, you know, accurate distances or line of sight built into it? If it does, cool. If not, it's not the end of the world.
Now, you spoke about immersion a moment ago. Do you use sound effects or music to help?
Sometimes, yes. I have a list of I have a YouTube music playlist that I've kind of pulled together from various, you know, um, video games or movies. I have a Battle Bards account that if I'm thinking about it, I'll you know get the little soundboard set up and have everybody's like for my 13th age game that I'm running the playtest. I have everybody's like spells programmed in and like weapon attacks. So when they make an attack, I can make it sound cool. Or when they set off a trap, you know, I can make the explosion sound interesting. But for me, that sweet spot of immersion is just enough of the flash and the sizzle that the players don't find it like overly intrusive or they get so focused on the like the minutia of hey what's the sound playing or you know where's my mini in relationship that they lose kind of sight of the whole thing, if that makes sense. It's really easy with all of the cool tools for them to take, you know, to go front and center. um, So the answer is yeah, as long as it adds something to the game.
I used to have a soundboard on my tablet until my tablet decided it didn't want to work anymore. That I had buttons for different sound effects like
Yeah.
campfire, rain,
Oh yeah.
uh, forest at night,
Yeah.
and I would have that sitting behind my screen, and I'd whatever the situation called for, I'd just let it play,
Yeah.
and it my players seem to enjoy it.
Yeah. It adds a little ambiance
Yeah,
to it. The other thing that I had a player in my second edition game, and he is really inspired by music. And so what's actually interesting is he'll put together soundtracks like Spotify playlists that are the soundtracks for the game. We very rarely play them while we're actually playing, but players will listen to them for inspiration or sometimes I'll put together, especially if I'm running a more modern game, I'll say, hey, you know, we're going to play in this mage game or this Shadowrun game. Here's an inspirational playlist to listen to as you're like thinking about your character or, you know, And that seems to get a little bit more traction with my players,
Okay.
more like music inspired by than the actual soundtrack of the game.
I'll put on something low, some medieval tune or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll use something from probably like Skyrim as battle music.
The Skyrim soundtrack is definitely some of my battle music.
Oh yeah.
Another, I love the Darkest Dungeon soundtrack. Like
Hmm.
it really ramps up the tension when you put on I mean it's just eerie enough, and for some of my players who have played Darkest Dungeon, I've noticed that it evokes like a physical response or a physiological response because they're having like traumatic flashbacks to playing the video game, which is sort of what I want in like real scary fights. So
What are some of the online resources that you use when you're running a game?
I'm a big fan. If I'm using Foundry, so Foundry is my go-to virtual tabletop. Um, I love just the modularity of it. I love the idea that it's, kind of community driven. So if there's something that somebody wants, the community is kind of providing it. Um, so I will typically, when I'm prepping for a session that I'm going to be using, let me see here. So Foundry is my go-to online resource for virtual tabletop. There's so many great websites out there. Like if you're running, I mean, obviously fifth edition is the the gorilla in the gaming industry. So, if I'm running fifth edition, which doesn't happen as much, like there's a ton of great resources out there, Cobalt Fight Club to, really spool up your encounters, or I mean, there's 6 or 7 websites where every spell and every monster are listed. And so you can just go, oh, I need a stat block for a Githyanki pirate. Somebody certainly, oh, look, there you go. Like there's something to use.
Hmm.
Maps, I use a lot of maps that I find on the internet, whether they're Dyson Logos has put up a ton of old school looking maps for free, or there's a battle map subreddit
Yeah.
where people just post their maps, and some of them are behind paywalls, which is fine because some of them are, some people are putting out just insanely gorgeous like animated maps. I've never used one, but I have to imagine someone out there is and is getting just tremendous value from this. Um, Other online resources that I like, again, check out Battle Bards if you haven't. They're a great website to just, buy a couple of sound effects for 50 cents or 99 cents, then you have them forever on their little soundboard. But for the most part, I'll do most of my prep or research usually. Again, if I'm running Jackals or a game like Lorantha, where I want to do the research to really make it feel authentic, um, that's a whole different set of online resources. Um, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now, do you use World Anvil or Kanka.io for world
I
building?
have never you I have looked at World Anvil, and I've looked at World Anvil specifically because I'm a huge fan of Castles and Crusades, and their world of Erd is highly detailed out on World Anvil. You know what? Back in the day, I used a lot of a site called Obsidian Portal,
Hmm.
which was it was designed to be kind of the wiki for your game. But I found for the most part, I keep most of my notes in a program called Scrivener. It's also
Yeah.
used for authors and writers. Mainly because what I'll do is I'm a huge fan of a little GMing book called Arbiter of Worlds,
I've
which
heard of
was
that one.
written. Oh, it's fantastic! It was written by Alexander Macrease of Adventure Conqueror and King. And actually, most of that advice is being rolled into Adventure Conqueror King Second Edition. And basically, he outlines kind of a very simple way of building your world kind of keeping each section to half a page to a page. And then when you're done, you go and redact the whole thing. And then you have your player's guide for the players, and they know like the major factions and, the area of the world and the recent history. And so I've just started doing that. I can give my players 1 to 4 pages of, hey, here's the campaign book for here's what you need to know about the campaign starting off, and usually share that as a Google Doc. Another
Now,
great resource, and this is kind of how you and I have been chatting, don't underestimate setting up a private Discord server for your gaming group. I have several, and they're dedicated, like each one is dedicated to a specific night of the week that we game, and those people are there. And I've got it broken up between like in character and out of character sections. We'll run Sometimes we'll run between between our weekly games. People have NPC discussions or do all of their prep or planning. One of the things I love about using Discord like that is I can say, all right, everybody, hey, we ended in town. We're about to go out on the next adventure. If you guys want to do all of your shopping now, that means that we're not running through half hour, 45 minutes of, oh, well, how much does this cost? Is this thing available? And you can get some of the downtime stuff out of the way, stored where people are going to like, keep a record. I've started actually handing out XP for recaps. And so I'll have a section on my Discord channel where whose turn is it to write the recap of last week's? All right, here's your little XP bonus for being the scribe. But now I have a thread of what's happened in the campaign, written from the player's point of view, which is always interesting because inevitably the players see things differently than I do, and they may miss things, which I'm okay with. My GM style has been described as the consequence list, where basically once the campaign starts, the rest of the campaign is really just dealing with the consequences of the player's own actions, and I'm okay with that. I feel like that is, uh, I think I may have put it a different way, but I'm okay with that kind of being how people feel how my games go. So I have this running, and then you can always make private channels just for you on your little Discord server where you can keep your notes and you can, jot down ideas. And I find Discord to be just a great tool for managing a gaming group. My goal this year is I have this grand idea where I'm going to collapse all of my individual gaming nights into the same game. So I'm wrapping up campaigns. And the idea will be everyone will be playing the same game in the same area of the world, but I'm going to run multiple groups kind of at the same time. And so I have my Discord channel already pre-set up. And the idea will be is when you're in a city with another group, I'll allow you guys will have like a common Discord channel where you can talk to each other. But as soon as your group heads out into the wilderness, everybody in that party gets moved to the wilderness chat. And so you can't talk to other player groups while you're adventuring because there would be no way for you to contact them.
right.
And so we'll see how that works out. I think it would be a great way of managing information and managing the game group at a high level. I think it'll work. We'll see.
You mentioned giving your players campaign guides.
Mm-hmm.
Can you actually get your players to read those guys? Because mine won't.
Because I keep them so short, I would say I get about a 75+% buy-in.
Yeah, that's not
Maybe
bad.
no, and again, if you can it's much like when a player comes to me with a background. I remember I had this great English teacher in high school who, he would say, all right, if this paper's 8 to 10 pages, I will give you your grade based off where you're at 10 pages. And I had a buddy who just loved to write and write. And he turned in a 15-page paper and got a C- on it because the professor graded him where he was in the paper at page 10 and then ignored the rest. And then he went back and read the rest and was like, hey, this was great. Like, I love these points that you made, but you needed to stay within the limit. So I feel the same way about my players' backgrounds. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to give you more than, 2 to 3 pages to read. I'm not going to read more than about a half page of background on your character for 2 reasons. One, that's about 2 to 3 pages if the whole group turns in a half page background on their character. So I'm not asking you to read any more than that I'm willing to do. But also I feel like sometimes character backgrounds can lead to everyone coming to the table thinking they're the main character of the story. And I'm much more of a fan of, hey, the story isn't what happens before you guys meet in the tavern or get picked up for your first run or embark on your starship. Like, the story is what happens as the gameplay emerges. So I'm far less interested in 5 pages of background as I am what's happened in the last 6 weeks. And so my players, my GMing style isn't for everyone. I know there are a lot of people who've come to my table and gone, that's just not for me. But I don't really have a problem. My problem isn't my group is ever too small. So, I'm a big proponent of not everything has to be made for me. And if that's how I feel, then like I'm okay if people are like, yeah, your style or your table just isn't for me. I'm like, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
uh,
I've had players not make it past session 0 because,
just not a good fit.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of the very first things I tell people is character death can and will happen.
A lot. It's just
I'm not very forgiving.
that my what I tell my players, and it has actually become a mantra in not just my gaming groups, but the gaming groups that are like child groups of mine, where like people that I brought in have become GMs and kind of gone off onto their own, do their own table, is the dice tell a story. Sometimes that story is, the most memorable sessions are the ones where the dice told a story that none of us were expecting. And so, yes, sometimes that is, you died. One of my players got me for Christmas a cause of death stamp. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
So I now stamp character sheets, and I will write out your cause of death, and we have a little wall that we hang up character sheets on. But in my mind, if death isn't an option, then players don't really have agency. If nothing bad can happen because of your choices, then you don't really have a choice, right? If you get to the end of a campaign and you got everything you wanted and won every fight, then none of your choices actually mattered.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I started out with the red box back in 82.
Oh, yeah.
I was 8 years old.
That's the one that had, isn't it? Is it Morgan?
Um,
Iron
Mal
Wolf, something.
Malve
Yeah.
with
But
Alina.
like the intro story has people dying in it. Like,
Oh
how do
yeah,
you play this game? And you're reading through the intro, like people are dying, like they're like front and center.
the very first NPC that you befriend was Alina the cleric, and yes, she dies in Act 1.
Yeah,
So yeah, consequences have action.
yeah,
Actions have consequences. Excuse me.
yeah.
Okay, we are running out of time, unfortunately. But JM, I want to say thank you for being here. And do you have
Hey,
any advice for anybody either wanting to start being a GM or start publishing?
okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Will. This was awesome. Like, if you ever want to talk again, you let me know. Like, I'll come on and we'll just, shoot the breeze about gaming. This has been, just delightful. If you're looking at getting into gaming, GMing, my advice is just do it. Um, when you start running a game, um, it will be bad, and that's okay. Like, I go back and look at my original games, like when I think about them, and they were awful. But at the time, neither I nor anyone at the table knew they were awful. And that used to be the beautiful thing about role-playing games. I don't believe in the Matt Mercer effect, but if I had one thing that I would say negative about all the actual play shows, and I've run a ton of actual play shows, is the fact that you're usually getting GMs who have been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years who are running actual plays. And so that may feel like the bar is set really high. Here's the thing, your friends are going to have fun with you no matter what you're doing. So in my mind, this is like the best time to get into role-playing games because you actually have the ability to get well put together starter sets or watch people who know what they're doing, as opposed to me who had a role-playing game for a year and didn't realize it was a game because he couldn't make heads. I mean, it used to be like an oral tradition is how you learn to GM. And now you have great channels like Professor Dungeon Master or Matt Colville or, Will, you interviewing a bunch of GMs like for getting tips and tricks and advice on how to do this. As for publishing, I think it's never been easier to kind of self-publish, especially with some of the guilds that they have on RPG, drive-through RPG. So like you want to publish for Savage Worlds, you just have to, you can publish for free under the swag license and put your stuff on drive-through RPG and allow people to, download your stuff. Now, when you do stuff like that, you don't get all of the money, but you're still making money off your products. And I know you can do that for Chaosium's games and 5th edition D&D and Savage Worlds. If you want to get into like publishing your own game, you kind of got two routes, and I'm watching the time, so I'm trying to do it super quick. Here's the thing. Most of my success in the industry has come from the fact that I am an extrovert's extrovert, and I don't mind going up to my gaming heroes and pitching them ideas. And what I've discovered is that companies are actually really open to hearing your ideas. And especially if you're doing stuff with their products. If you want to get their attention, I started working with Pelgrane because I was doing a podcast about 13th Age, and they loved that. They saw that I was passionate about it and that I understood it. So start a blog, start a YouTube channel, start a Twitch channel, talk about the things you love, and then use that to point people to when you say, hey, I have this idea, I've been talking about your game for 3 months and I would love to do something. So that's if you want to go out and get published, talk to your favorite game companies, see if they accept freelance writers or have, a guild program where you could write your own stuff and build up a body of work. If you're going to self-publish, I would say find an editor. Your editor and your artists are really going to be what helps sell your product. Because we live in an industry where we judge books by the covers that they put out, and art brings people in, but nothing drags me out of a book as much as grammatical errors. Like if I see them, it kind of grinds at me. So editors, artists are your two best friends.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. JM, I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, Will.
Guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. And we'll
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed the content, please like and comment, tell me what you thought. If you want to help me out, consider joining my Patreon using the link in the description. Patrons can enjoy my videos before they are released on YouTube. You can also download articles on ttrpg subjects that I have written, and I'll be posting chapters of my upcoming book, The Game Master's Guide to Crafting Legendary Worlds. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to make sure you never miss out.